please give a big post-lunch App Promotion Summit Berlin working from home welcome to Tilly and Fraser from Redbox.
Thanks, James. Yeah, thanks for joining us on our ASA workshop. God, I'd much rather be in Berlin than in my bedroom, but it is what it is. It's going to take around about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end, but please send questions through as we progress. Just a quick one before we start. It's possible that it could be a special guest joining us on this workshop. It's my kitten, Alan. Alan will want to know what's going on. And I said to Alan before, I said, Alan, this is really important. Don't interrupt. And Alan looked at me like, I'm a cat. I don't care. So anyway, let's see how that pans out. We're Redbox Mobile, like James said, ASO and ASA agency. We just won ASO Company of the Year last week, which is very exciting. But we're going to focus on Apple search ads today. I head up the sales team. I've worked with everything from startups through to huge global apps. So something to bring to the table there. I'm accompanied by Tilly. Tilly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Fraser. So as Fraser said, I'm Tilly. I've been using Apple search ads since the UK storefront became eligible in 2017. But as a company, we've been using it since it first launched. We're pretty much all Apple search ads certified, and it's our favored user acquisition channel, namely because you get to advertise directly to users who are actively searching for an app. For the last 2 years, I've been product owner of our Apple Search Ads Optimization platform, which Fraser touched on briefly, which was launched back in 2018.
So we work across lots of different clients that are on our platform. So we built a platform 3-4 years ago. The platform allows us to automate Apple search ads, but along the way, we obviously had a lot of learnings to create that platform. So we're going to cover everything from subscription apps here and how they use Apple search. We've got loyalty apps. We have apps that include deposits, in-app purchase, apps that are using Apple search ads for ad serving. So there's a whole range of uses that we are working on Apple search ads. And because we have built a platform, we have literally hundreds of clients that we can take learnings from that we'll share with you, big and small in all geos, with a lot of spend attached to them as well. We also plug into Apple's API, so we think we have some thoughts on how Apple's algorithm works, and we'll share that with you. Ultimately, most of the people we talk with are trying to scale their campaigns. They want to get more money away. They want to drive more value for money. And at the end, all the way through, we'll be taking you through hopefully some practical ways that you can improve your Apple search ads performance. So these are the topics we're going to cover. Why bidding low can lead to higher tap costs, how you can improve your keyword discovery, the impact that ASO can have on your ASA, and finally, we're going to wrap that all up with how to scale your campaigns. And we've actually got some kind of quick fire questions at the end, covering things like creative sets that you might be interested in. So I'm going to hand over to Tilly here to take us through some of the detail.
Thanks, Fraser. So the first problem we're going to discuss today is how setting bids lower than what's optimal for sampling can actually lead to higher tap costs, as well as you discounting keywords too early. But first, I should cover quickly how Apple decides which app actually wins the ad placement and at what cost. So the decision is a function of both relevancy and your cost per tap bid price. And Apple make it very clear that taps are an important measure of relevancy. So it's not a massive jump to say that the more relevant you are, i.e. the more taps you can get, the cheaper the cost of your taps. And that's exactly what we see.
Tilly, can you just expand on the cheaper costs? Explain in more detail?
Yeah, of course. So in a campaign, you don't really get keywords more relevant for your app than your brand keywords. And these are usually amongst the cheapest cost per taps in your campaign. I can think of one example where the TAP costs of direct competitors are between 2 and 7 times more than what we see for the branded keywords. And this makes sense because in Apple search ads, you pay for taps, not impressions. So if you can double the likelihood of generating a tap, Apple can afford to charge you half the price and generate the same revenue for the same number of impressions. And we're told what the likelihood of generating a tap is, and so is Apple through the tap through rate.
And so how is the tap through rate calculated?
So for the tap through rate to be calculated, we need to be generating impressions and hopefully taps. In other words, the relevancy of a keyword needs to be sampled for your app. And with sampling, the bigger the sample, the more likely the calculated tap through rate will be close to the true value. So for example, if the tap through rate of a keyword is 10%, that means on average, it will take 10 impressions to generate 1 tap. But it's perfectly possible to not get any taps in the first 10 impressions, but get 2 in the next 10 shown, and as a result, have an overall tap through rate of 10%. So the solution is, when a keyword is new to a campaign, put the bid higher than you normally would so you can properly sample the relevancy of the keyword for your app.
And so when you say a high cost per tap bid, how do people know what a high cost per tap bid is?
So what's considered to be a high cost per tap bid does vary between categories, and it's likely determined by how many advertisers are bidding on that search and how much other advertisers are willing to pay for a tap, which is ultimately driven by the expected revenue for that kind of app. For the more expensive categories, such as sports betting, it's not unusual to have bids of around £50, whereas casual games and utility apps often have bids around and under £1, which I appreciate isn't a super helpful answer, but use the information that's available to you. When you create a campaign within Apple Search Ads, they will recommend a default cost per tap bid for your ad group. Use this information and also consider how much you need to pay for a user to remain profitable, because no doubt it'll be similar to what your competitors are willing to pay. And the usual advice when deciding how much you can afford to pay for a download or an event, and therefore calculating what to put the bid at, is to make sure it's profitable. However, when you're testing a new keyword, you shouldn't limit your ability to sample by having the bids too low.
Now, how long do you think people should be sampling the cost for the bids
So
for?
the exact time will depend on the search availability for the keyword, since it's more about how many impressions you are generating rather than a particular period of time. But I would say in general, roughly a week, you'll want to be seeing a relatively consistent daily tap through rate.
And so could you just take us through an example of this?
Sure. So you can see in the graphs here, we have the average cost per tap, the daily average cost per tap of a keyword on the left, and the daily tap through rate of a keyword on the right. And you can see that at the start, we saw a much higher cost per tap value than what we flattened out to. So these are in the first couple of weeks of a keyword running, while the tap through rate remained relatively stable. So in summary, allow your keyword to build momentum in generating impressions by setting higher than normal bids before judging its performance.
Cool, thanks for that, Tilly. If anyone has any questions on this, it's obviously sort of reasonably technical, please ping them through and we'll cover them at the end. Okay, so we're gonna move on to a very common issue, which is really revolves around the fact that most people are bidding on a handful of keywords that are driving events. So how do you go about finding new keywords? So Tilly, over to you.
Thanks, Fraser. So yeah, as Fraser said, very common. A lot of our clients will want to scale their campaign, so increase the number of downloads or events without significantly increasing the cost per download or event. And often you can't just keep increasing the bids, because it will either drive up costs until it's not profitable, or you just don't see an increase in your share of voice because your initial bid was sufficient. So you need to take a different approach to win more impressions. If increasing your bids isn't the answer, then finding new keywords for the campaign definitely is. Your first point of call is the Apple Search Ads keyword recommendations. You'll see this both at campaign creation or when you add a keyword to an existing ad group. However, don't blindly add all the keywords. They can be quite broad. Pick the ones that are relevant competitors or the generic keywords that best describe your app. So be selective. The next action to take, if you haven't already, is to set up a discovery ad group within your campaign and discover new keywords using broad match and search match.
Is there a proportion of keywords you'd recommend having on broad match?
So my view on it is that it's not the proportion of keywords you have on broad match that matters, but the proportion of taps that they're generating. The vast majority of your taps should be coming from your exact match keywords for bidding and attribution confidence. Broad match can be quite broad, as can search match, so it's important to bid responsibly. I usually set the bid as a percentage of the cost per download goal. So for example, 20 to 40%, depending on how long the discovery group has been running. It is important to keep on top of your negative keywords in this ad group. As soon as you see the search terms coming through, you'll want to be adding these as discovery ad group negative keywords, and then adding the ones that perform well on exact match to your main ad groups. Another good source is competitor metadata. It's often a great source of keyword inspiration since you can see the keywords that your competitors are interested in organically ranking for.
And if people aren't sure who their competitors are, how would you go about finding that out?
So if you're not sure who your competitors are, look at the apps that appear on your apps listing page under the You May Also Like section. Or if you don't have any there because your app's relatively new, search the keywords that you're interested in showing for and see which apps come up. For example, if you want to show for the term memory game, go into the iOS App Store, search memory game and review the top 10 apps that come up. But also take a broader approach. Think about the types of apps that your users may be interested in that are not direct competitors. For example, if you're a sports betting app, you may want to appear for searches for a sports radio because you know that perhaps people who listen to sports radios are also likely to place sports bets. And finally, think about the different ways users can search on the App Store. We're often told, in comparison to PPC on the web, that users search with much fewer words. However, while this is often the case, we have seen longer keywords work really well too.
It's this is an interesting one. Can you give everyone an example of where we've seen longer key or search phrases working well?
Yes, of course. So for one of our news apps on iPad, we found a new efficient keyword that actually contains 7 words. The Times and the Sunday Times for iPad is quite a mouthful to say and is actually longer than the app's title, but works really well for the campaign. And while it might be obvious to generations that have grown up with smartphones that you don't need to indicate whether you want an iPad or an iPhone app, because Apple obviously know which device you're on, we do see users searching for a brand name and then for iPhone or for iPad, particularly for iPad. And you've also got to remember that the search term your keyword is matched to may not actually be what the user typed in, but rather what they selected. When you're typing in the App Store, like on a search engine, you are given suggestions based on what you've typed so far. And I think that's why we sometimes see impression for keywords matched to an app's full name rather than the shortened one that they're known colloquially by. So the solution is pretty obvious. Regularly review your campaign keyword list. Check in Apple Search Ads for its recommended keywords and for search terms picked up through broad match and search match. Review your competitors' keyword strategy and consider how your users may be searching in the App Store.
Cool, thanks for that, Tilly. So if anyone's got any questions around keyword discovery, how many of them they should be running, how often, how long for, any techniques that they might want to discuss with us about discovering new keywords, ping them over and we'll cover them in the Q&A. Okay, so as we started with, we run ASO as well as ASA, and we know there is an impact and a relationship between the two. So we wanted to share with you our thoughts on this. because some companies are running ASO together with ASA, the same person. Other companies, it's completely separate divisions. So I'm going to hand over to Tilly on this one.
Thanks, Fraser. So yeah, as Fraser said, the final issue we're going to cover today is how some underestimate the impact of App Store Optimisation, also known as ASO, on your Apple search ads performance. So we initially started as an ASO agency. So from the start, we've always considered the role of ASO in Apple search ads campaigns. And more recently, Apple have also confirmed that your app's listing page is used to determine relevancy. We believe that ASO can affect your relevancy score and therefore ultimately your costs in two different ways. First, as Apple implies, the keywords used in your app listing provide an indication of relevancy for those searches. And second, through the presentation of your app in the search results and how persuasive it is in encouraging the user to interact with the ad, i.e. to tap the advert.
So on your first point, how can you indicate to Apple the keywords that you think are relevant to your app?
So as Apple suggests on their webpage, you should be putting the keywords in your title and your descriptions. You've also got the opportunity to provide a 100-character keyword list that's not visible to the user when you update your app. This key string and the titles, the app title and the subtitle, are where you want to put the keywords that are most important for your app.
So what are your tips for improving the user interaction with the ASA ad?
So considering the space that's taken up by the screenshots and the app previews in the image ad, you should focus your efforts there first. The ad shows 3 portrait screenshots or app previews or 1 landscape screenshot or app previews. So another consideration that you should factor in is the number of screenshots your app listing has, as this can affect the proportion of image ads shown for your app. And we typically see a higher tap through rate with image ads, up to 3 times the default text ad.
And so does the number of screenshots affect how many times the ad is shown?
Yes, so in Apple search ads, there are 2 types of default ads, the default image ad and the default text ad. It used to be the case that for searches that your app organically ranked first for example, your brand or a highly relevant generic term, the default text ad was shown. However, now if you have at least 6 portrait screenshots or at least 2 landscape screenshots, your first half is shown in the ad and the remaining half in the organic listing, meaning that you've got the opportunity to show off even more about your app and brand. And not only does this result in the ad that typically has a higher tap through rate, but your brand is taking up more of the screen space given the image ad is bigger than the text ad. Your screenshot should clearly show the best features of your app in a concise way. So in summary, before you start Apple search ads, or if you're struggling to generate impressions on keywords you think you should, review your ASO strategy and see what improvements can be made.
Thanks, Tilly. I just wanted to cover one more point on this, which was screenshots and brand protection. So some of the clients will just use Apple Search to protect their brand, and they'll come to us and they're sometimes a little bit frustrated. A little bit like the example on the left here with Monopoly. They're like, well, why haven't we got the whole takeover? A little bit like Avatrade here on the right. So here we can see Monopoly Casino search term. Their ad is appearing in blue without the screenshot shown. And this app is muscling in on the action in third spot down here. So the reason their ad is not being shown as screenshots is that they've only got 5 screenshots in their ASO listing. So Apple is not showing, can't show any more screenshots when it displays the ad. So what you need to do is you need to create 6 or more screenshots. And as a result, when someone searches for your brand, you get the takeover, unlike the Monopoly example here. So as per before, if you have any questions on ASA screenshots, send them over. Okay, so we're going to sort of wrap those 3 points up together with sort of the biggest question we get asked, which is how to scale. So Over to you, Tilly.
Yes, so successfully scaling a campaign is typically thought of as increasing your performance on your KPI. And more often than not, to do this efficiently, you'll need to either find a new source of impressions or increase your conversion rates. The three common problems we've discussed today can cause your campaign to stagnate. To encourage your campaign to scale, check you're not experiencing these issues. First, we recommend you review your app listing and see what can be improved. If your tap-through rate is low for keywords you're highly relevant for, see if your screenshots can be made more engaging. And don't forget to make sure you have at least 6 screenshots or app previews if portrait, or at least 2 if they're landscape. If your tap cost is high for searches you want to appear for, add them to your keyword strategy, being mindful of where it's weighted the most. And next, regularly review your keyword list using the information you have available to you within Apple Search Ads, so the recommendations they give, but also the discovery you can do using Broad Match and Search Match. And in the App Store, the search suggestions and the competitor inspiration. And finally, when you add the new keywords to the campaign, remember to properly sample the performance of the keyword so you can make an informed judgment of whether that keyword works well for your app.
Great, thanks, Tilly. So we've done sort of a fair bit of detail on bid prices, keyword discovery, and ASO, ASA, but we thought we should sort of cover a few other topics that get asked. So first one I'm going to ask you, Tilly, is there is a discrepancy, obviously, between the Apple data and the MMP, be it a Just or AppsFlyer, whoever you're using. What are your thoughts on adding sort of targeting to reduce that discrepancy?
So there are a few reasons for why you may see a different count of downloads in Apple Search Ads versus your MMP. And one that can account for a big proportion of the discrepancy is users enabling limit ad tracking, often referred to as LAT, which results in their IDFA not being sent to the MMP by Apple. And therefore, the MMP can't attribute the install back to the campaign using the IDFA. And this often results in the install being tracked as organic. So an obvious way to get around this issue is to add demographic targeting to the campaign, because if you have age or gender targeting, then you'll only show to users that have LAT turned off. However, doing this does limit the size of the audience available to you and potentially results in a higher overall cost, because if cost is being driven by competition and LAT off is the user that's showing the ad most often because they're shown if you have demographic targeting turned on or not, we expect LAT off users to be more expensive. So I much prefer to show the advert to all users and then to estimate the true performance of the campaign by factoring in how many of my users can't be tracked by the MMP. So for example, if 80% of my users can be tracked within my MMP, then I would take the number of installs and events that I see in the MMP and divide that by 0.8 to estimate my total performance. You can also review your App Store Connect data to see if it supports your calculations if you're unsure.
Cool, okay, thanks for that, Tilly. Question number two here, we quite often are starting campaigns, stopping campaigns, moving budget between geos and apps. And one of the things we've been exploring is, does Apple, carry over the performance of one campaign into another? Tilly, can you share with everyone what we've found?
So it does for keywords that are transferred from the old campaign to the new campaign, because relevancy is stored at the app level rather than at the campaign level. But if you have had a campaign paused for a while, you may see initial costs initial cost high at the start because it will need the data to determine your relevancy again. If you're starting new keywords in the new campaign, you're not really starting from scratch, I guess, because it's the first time you're testing it. But no, it only does it for the keywords that you had in the old campaign.
Cool. And what are your thoughts on location targeting if an app is only available in, say, 1 or 2 cities? Would you target those cities, or how would you play it?
So there are some situations where you need to add location targeting, but in general, I'm not a massive fan of adding it to the campaign. So this is targeting in cities, as you said, but you can also target at the state level. And I'm not a fan for a couple of reasons. So first, location targeting is based on where the Apple ID was registered rather than the actual location of the user. So say someone is registered as being in London, they may move to Edinburgh. If your app's functionality is available in Edinburgh, they may not be, well, they wouldn't be counted if they had their Apple ID still registered in London. But even if you ignore this, although we haven't been traveling to work for the last few months, it's not uncommon for people to commute to different cities for work. So it may be that they don't live in the city that the functionality of the app would be relevant for, but they spend quite a bit of their time in that city. So you'd want to target them. So my advice would be, if your brand isn't super well known, and particularly not well known for the functionality only being available in a certain city, I would look for competitors that are more well known for the functionality, or add the city name to some of the generic keywords that you're bidding on. And also, I would recommend making it clear in the title of your app, if possible, the city name that it's available in.
Okay, great. And what about creative sets? Any best practice that we've learned that we would recommend to people?
Yeah, so unlike other ad networks, you don't have a huge amount of control over the appearance of the ad. Apple takes parts of your app listing page to build the ad. So for example, your title, your screenshots, app previews, start of your long description, your ratings count. So Creative Sets gives you an opportunity to slightly tailor your ad for selected demographics or searches. And they allow you to do this by selecting different screenshots and app locations at the ad group level. Without Creative Sets, the default image ad is shown where the first 3 screenshots of your app or screenshots or app previews of your app are shown if portrait, or just the first one if landscape. So my first tip with Creative Sets is make sure you have a good selection of screenshots and or app previews to choose from. To add these to your app listing, you'll need to do an app update. So make sure if you're planning to do Creative Sets that you're able to do this and coordinate with whoever is responsible for the app updates. And while you may want to tailor the screenshots to certain searches, for example, if it's a news app, you may want a screenshot for big events such as elections, you need to make sure that your screenshots still show off the best features of your app and do this in a concise way. And finally, when reviewing the results, be mindful of how many impressions each ad got. Unlike other A/B testing functionality, Apple will show the ad that performs best rather than like a 50-50 split, and it will continue to show the default ad, so that's worth bearing in mind. And one final point, another thing to be aware of is that if you rank organically first for a search, the default image ad will be shown, not the creative set. This is because of the functionality we discussed earlier, where the organic listing shows the second half of the screenshots. So in the case of portrait screenshots, the 4th, 5th and 6th.
Great, thanks Tilly. Hopefully that's cleared up some of the additional topics. So to kind of summarize, we've been through a few issues in detail like scaling, higher cost per tap, install, CPAs. These are some of the most common issues that we encounter, and finally keyword discovery. There are obviously lots more issues around Apple search ads. We have 2 solutions for these in general. One is our platform, the Redbox platform. The URL is there. It automates everything we've just discussed, including scaling. So it's really easy to plug in your app and press go and off it goes. Obviously, you can talk with us too, which is what most of our clients would do before engaging in the platform. And between myself and Tilly, we can help solve or at least come up with a solution for most Apple search ads queries. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to move to some of the questions that have been asked. I'm going to stop sharing. You can see, I can see Tilly big on my screen all of a sudden. So let's have a quick look. So Tilly, I'm going to ask these questions to you. This is from somebody. Could search ads show an App Store video preview as an ad, or does it just show images or text ads?
Yeah, so the app previews would be shown within the image ad. So when you're checking the results, you'll only see the default text ad, it broken down by the default text ad or the default image ad, but within the image ad, it can be a preview or a screenshot.
Okay, cool. Should I stop bidding on keywords if I rank on them organically and add them into negative keywords field? From Laura.
This is something of a debate within our company. So yeah, it's a good question. My view is that you shouldn't stop bidding on it. I know that you might think, well, if I show organically first, I'm showing within the screenshots, like the screen space of the phone. But I think there is a difference between your ad being shown above your organic listing and someone else's ad being shown above your organic listing. So while you may still be visible to the user, I think you will end up losing customers because after all, we, in our campaigns, in our Apple Search Ads campaigns, bid on competitors and we win taps and downloads from people searching for their competitors. So my view on it is that you should continue to bid on your brand.
Cool. A few people have asked a question around this, asking about, do you accept the bid recommendations from Apple? What are your thoughts on that? Some people saying they're a little bit high, sometimes, the bid recommendations.
Yeah, of course. So you get the bid recommendation for your ad group at the start when you create a campaign, or but when you've started collecting data within Apple Search Ads, you see a suggested low bid and a suggested high bid, and you've also got the bid strength indications from red, amber, and green. I think what's most important is working out what's profitable for you, and when you're sampling at the start, just go above what you think would be profitable, because you don't want to discount a keyword too early. So no, I'd say, like the keyword recommendations from Apple, don't blindly accept it. It may be the case that you might want to review your keyword list and perhaps find other keywords that work better for you.
Cool. So Ulf has asked, do you generally agree with the split that Apple is proposing in terms of brand, generic, competitor, and discovery? I guess he's asking how the campaign is split by, I don't know if it's budget or quantity of keywords, but maybe some thoughts around that.
Yeah, so when I first started using Apple Search Ads, I think their recommendation was to set up a different campaign for each category, but now they advise doing a different ad group. I think the most important distinction to make with the ad groups is your discovery ad groups from the other ones. In your discovery ad group, you want to have all your other keywords on negative, so you want to keep it separate in that way. In terms of whether you want to separate your brand, competitor, or generic keywords, I don't think it matters too much, because you should be doing cost per tap bid optimization at the keyword level anyway. So and the general rule of thumb is that you have all your keywords on exact match anyway within that group, so you wouldn't need to add negatives to that group. But the only benefit you'd really get from splitting it out by ad groups is that you've got the default cost per tap bid. So when you add a new keyword, that's what it defaults the bid to until you change it. So I wouldn't worry too much about having brand, competitor, and generic separated. Just make sure you're doing the keyword cost per tap bid optimizations at the keyword level.
I think this is a kind of ASA question. It's from Angels. What is your recommendation around optimizing towards in-app sales rather than installs? What they're actually trying to find out though is, will that have an impact on organic rankings if you're bidding on keywords that generate installs but no in-app sales? Does that make sense?
think so. So obviously Apple aren't super transparent with how their search ranking algorithm works for the organic listings, but I think it's pretty clear that the number of downloads you get within like certain timeframes does impact where you rank organically for keywords and for your category rankings, because you tend to see apps that are trending in the searches move up the category rankings quite quickly. So yeah, I would say generating lots of installs are important for your category rankings. In terms of optimizing the in-app events, that's more seeing which keywords work well post-install. So you'll find that some keywords work better than others in terms of converting the user to complete an in-app event. I don't know if it affects the organic ranking. I imagine downloads would be weighted more heavily, particularly because Apple don't have insights into all your events, because at the end of the day, when you set up your events with the MMP, you can decide what the events are. They're not always in-app purchases or subscriptions.
Okay, cool. How do you get more impressions on keywords that drive events?
So the most obvious answer here would be to increase your bid. But when increasing your bids, you have to be mindful of how it affects your overall costs and whether it remains profitable for you to do so. If increasing your bids isn't an option, it may be that you don't actually need to improve the number of impressions you're generating on the keywords that drive the events, but perhaps if you can improve your tap through rate or your conversion rate, you then actually end up generating more events because you're getting more taps and therefore more downloads. And to do this, I'd recommend reviewing your screenshots to see if you can improve the likelihood of the user engaging with your ad.
Okay, fine, that's good. A few people are, one week we're obviously expecting the IDFA changes, iOS 14. What are our thoughts around that? How's it going to affect Apple search ads?
So in terms of how it affects you doing your optimization within Apple search ads, it will really depend on what your campaign is optimizing to. So if your campaign is just optimizing to generate downloads, then your method shouldn't need to change. But obviously, if you're optimizing to post-install events, you may need to rethink your approach in terms of how you account for the users that perhaps might not be able to be tracked through the MMP, because we do expect that to increase. In terms of performance on Apple search ads, some have suggested that with the privacy changes and how they're likely to affect other ad networks more significantly than Apple search ads, that we might see advertisers put more of their budgets into Apple search ads. And if that's the case, we may see an increase in competition, and as a result, we may see higher cost per tap bids. If this does turn out to be true, then keyword discovery and a good ASO strategy will be more important than ever. But of course, a lot of this is speculative. We don't know for sure. We still don't know exactly when it will happen. There are rumors that the IDFA changes will be enforced from March with the iOS 14.4 update, but we're still waiting to hear.
Cool. There's just one question I wanted to go back on, because a few people have sort of liked Alina's question. It's about basically, should I be protecting the brand using Apple search ads when I rank obviously organically #1 for the brand? I just wanted to come in on this one. So we've had a couple of brands we've worked with. One was the National Lottery in the UK, and the other's a sports betting brand. And we've been through an exercise with several brands that want to understand the answer to that question. And it's not a straight cut answer. We let the data drive whether you should be bidding on your own brand or not. In the case of Lottery brand, it was only relevant for them to be bidding on their own brand on the nights there was £100 million rollover, and the rest of the time it didn't matter. It was a kind of brand decision rather than a numbers decision on that one. With sports betting, we know that there's lots of installs and deposits, typically 2 hours before a match happens. And some brands are prepared to pay, say, up to £50 to protect their brand. And after that, they're like, let the competition have it. It's not worth us monetizing at that price. So we go through an exercise with our clients to work out what costs you stop protecting your brand because organic kicks in, or it's just not worth paying that much for them. So that's something that's quite a common one. This is a good question. What's at the top of our wish list for new features in Apple search ads?
Oh,
Was it not doing very well, Tilly? What would you like it to do? Don't annoy Apple, by the way.
That is an interesting question. I guess selfishly, from my point of view, I'm hoping to see more of the functionality we see in Apple's UI in the API. So, for example, the keyword popularity scores, they're only really available in the UI. But in terms of what I'd like to see in the UI, oh, that is a really tricky one. The share of voice reports that they've recently added, they're quite helpful. It's quite helpful to review that at a keyword level. Or perhaps more recommendations.
More ad formats?
What, in terms of like different places or the different styles?
I don't know. Should you be allowed to just do an ad, rather than a screenshot or an app preview video? I don't know. What would improve? What would drive more value for money for advertisers? I guess.
Yeah, I do like though how Apple build the adverts for you, because although it does limit your control, it makes it super easy to set up user acquisition campaigns, whereas other ad networks you need good creatives built before you can even start the campaigns. But yeah, perhaps more recommendations in terms of like, if I was to increase my bid by this much, I'd expect to get this many more impressions. Those sorts of recommendations would be really cool to see.
Okay, cool. Okay, I think we have covered the questions. James, I don't know if you're still on the line.
Yep, certainly am.
But obviously, please contact us or have a look at our platform, Redbox platform, if you want to know more. And I think that's it. That's it from me and Tilly.
Great, that was great, guys. Thanks, really good, and great to see all the questions, and glad you could go deeper into that topic with us today. And so how can people follow up with you over on the site, I guess?
Yeah, Fraser at redboxmobile.com is probably the easiest way.
Okay, maybe someone will drop that into the chat. If maybe you guys could head over to the chat on your computer after you finish up here, and maybe tie up any loose ends. That'd be great.
I'll do it now.
Yeah, maybe log in on your computer, or you'll be it might be a bit easier. All right, but yeah, I want to say a big thanks to you guys for joining us, and yeah, congratulations on your win last week.
Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody. Hope it was useful.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, bye.